Namaskar. Today we are for the 26th Kritya talk. This is the 26th session of Kritya talk after our poetry festival in this pandemic time. And we are lucky that we are getting many subjects, many scholars, experts on all subjects. I have a very different question and a different person with me. We know this is pandemic and we need a doctor in this time very badly. But very strangely that in this time we are finding at least 150 festivals, poetry festivals, virtual poetry festivals all around the world. What is the connection between poetry and medical or medicine? I have written a book and which came out in this pandemic time only, The Fist Which Opens, a poetry therapy from distance past to present, but as a poet only. I am not a doctor, but today I am with you. I am here with a doctor with a real medical degree and a great poet and a scholar. And so Dr. Hans Amadé Esperer, he studied linguistics, languages, philosophy, and human medical, worked many years in USA at Harvard University, MIT, Cambridge, and then from 2013 onward, he is living in Germany. And now he is spending his time as a poet, essayist, translator, editor. The very important thing with Dr. Amadé is that he knows many languages. German is, I think, his natural language. Then he knows Anglo-American, Italian, and Hebrew poetry. Hebrew poetry. And he composes poetry in many languages. That is very fantastic. That in German, English, Italian, and Hebrew. He is Secretary General of Società Dante. I can't pronounce. You have to pronounce it, Dr. Amadé.
Dante Alighieri.
That is what. Can you pronounce it again, please?
It's the Società Dante Alighieri di Würzburg. It's dedicated to the work of the great poet, the Italian poet of the Renaissance, Dante Alighieri, whom you know. He wrote the Divine Comedy, this famous book.
Yes. Divine Comedy, yes.
Right.
Yeah. And he got awards in 2017, 2019, and again these German name, I don't want to spoil them. And I think 2020 also you are getting award. And you are doing many translation work. And I think last month you were busy in finishing your translation project. So, Dr. Amadé, welcome to you in Kritya Talk. And Kritya, we have started in 2005. We had poetry festivals only. But after this 10 days poetry festival in pandemic time, I feel that we need to discuss a lot. There are so much to discuss. And that is how we started Kritya Talk, and this is the 26th one. So welcome you, Dr. Amadé. Please tell me about your idea of poetry first for a few minutes for our audience.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank you, Rati, for inviting me to this fantastic endeavor. And I'm happy to participate today. And
for our audience.
well, first and foremost, do you hear me clearly? I think as the transmission is just no, it's okay again. No, I can hear you again.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, Rati, as I said, I thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to participate today in your fantastic show. And I agree 100% with you that it's very important in the times of a pandemic to have sessions like that, combining all the countries of the world, the whole universe, so to speak, the poetic universe together. And I'm happy to share my thoughts on poetry and aesthetics with you.
Thank you, Dr. Amadé. I also want to tell audience that I have actually talked to Dr. Amadé about two more important things. One was that there is a combination between medical science and the poetry, which is very important because mind and body both are connected. And in that case, what do you want to say? How do you feel as a doctor and a poet? So how do you combine both things?
Well, I think there is a fundamental need of the human mind for poetry. It's such a fundamental need like eating, drinking, or having sex. Having poetry is very important for the brain, and it has been shown that it enhances the development of the mental abilities of children, of adults. It has also been shown to improve the clinical status of patients suffering from Alzheimer's, for example. But I don't want to dive too deeply into this matter. Just let me say that, as you know, our brain is built up of two hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And usually there is the left hemisphere is doing all the rational work for us. And the right hemisphere is kind of the silent participant, as one could think. But the truth is that without the right hemisphere, we weren't able to indulge in language and, of course, not in poetry at all. The creativity of the human mind has its location mainly in the right hemisphere. Although the left and the right hemisphere, of course, interact very intensely. But it has shown from neurological experiments and in patients suffering certain accidents where different parts of the right or the left hemispheres were injured, that only the total interplay between the two hemispheres makes up a healthy human person. So, and to conclude, the fundamental capability of man to enjoy music, art, and especially language lies within the faculties of the right hemisphere.
Yeah, this is actually when we are listening from a doctor's mouth, that it really we get impressed. Otherwise, um, whenever I go to some for my festival, whenever I go to college or somewhere, the people immediately say that, oh, I am a science student, I do not know poetry. So I always say that what is the relation between science student and poetry? Because our ancestors have learned it long back. You will be astonished to know that there was a very great mathematician in I think a 6th or 7th century, and he has written a mathematical book, which is the language was the poetry. The most of our scientific book in ancient time was written in a poetic language. I always feel that why they need poetic language, because a poetic language is a concrete and small, and they used to work like formulas. So when you learn, even a medical also, like Ayurveda, Charak Sushruta and all, they have written in poetic language. So why they have written in poetic language? Because they are um, uh, they can write. Poetry is actually making concrete and making short, and it is easy to by heart, and that is how they might have been written. Moreover, the poetry actually my mainstream of the work is Atharva Veda, the most ancient book in the world, four Vedas. Among them, Atharva Veda is the fourth book. This is called the available most ancient books in the world, Vedas. The fourth Veda, Atharva Veda, is my main work, and 40% of these hymns are for medical only. For
Mm-hmm.
medical. Uh,
I see.
they
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Impressive.
yes, 40%. And but there is true that we do not know, because the practical practical area has lost in many years. Only the poetry is left. So we do not know how they use medical, but they were using those hymns for the medical. So I was
Mm-hmm.
always astonished that what is the relation between this poetry and medicine. So gradually you read that they were enlightening medicine by their poetry.
Mm-hmm.
They were communicating their patient by their poetry, and many more things could be there. But when I meet you and I saw your biodata, and we have a communication for a long time, I think 5-6 months, and then I was astonished to see your work, and I said that this is the real example what we have seen in an ancient book. So your experience will be very helpful to us. What you have talked about, the two part of mind, is very important. I want to ask that how did you get interested in poetry, or you're interested in poetry from very early time?
From very early on. I think I wrote my first poem at the age of 13 or so as a birthday present for my grandma then. I wouldn't publish it nowadays, but I always was interested and attracted by rhythmic language. Rhythm was what interested me most. And I also like very much music. So I like the music of language per se. And I think the music in poems, the other way, let me put it the other way around. If there is no music in a poem, I think this poem is not needs to be rewritten in my eyes. Poetry implies that it should contain some music, because it's the rhythm and the sound of a poem which enters our understanding without having to resort to the rationality of the left brain. So, as Eliot put it once, a good poem teaches you something what you only later decipher when you think of it. But the poem has such an immediate impact on your aesthetic reception that you think in the moment where you hear the poem that you have understood it, although you might not have. So that's the mystery of poetry.
Thank you very much. This is a very good reply. But I ask you that what kind of rhythm? There are two kind of rhythm, like in a modern poetry in India, especially like in some languages, Hindi and other languages. They are now before we had a musical rhythm, like a song. And then we had a verses actually the rhythm almost like music that you can like Ramayana and all, you can sing in a proper way, or without singing also there is a style, the structure, and you have to fix your ideas in those structure. But in the contemporary time in India especially, they go for free verses. Still, I know that there will be rhythm while reading the poetry, or while even though it is a written, when you read it, there should be some rhythm, a kind of rhythm. Do you go for a musical rhythm, or you go, because I know that musical rhythm is very popular in European countries, though they are not very popular in Asian countries. So recently, so do you think that do we bring back those musical rhythm, or
Yes, I would think so. Modern Western lyrical poetry derives from the ancient Greek poetry, and it's called lyrical poetry because the ancient Greek poems were accompanied by a lyre, by an instrument, and every poem at that time was a more or less a song. It had been sung, and during the centuries, the poem more and more divided from the musical part, and it became a written art, so to speak. But I think there is some good consensus nowadays that even in the so-called postmodern times we are in right now, music and musicality and rhythm matter very much. Even though a poem primarily is a written thing, it must be understood as a structure, a linguistic structure that only attracts the audience if there is some music in it. So in other words, there is a recommendation that you give the younger poets who are about to embark on the field of poetry. You tell them, whenever you write a poem, go ahead and read it before you publish it, or before you show it to someone else, because then you will see where the pitfalls of your rhythm may lie, and you can see very easily when you go ahead and read your poem, what you wrote aloud to yourself. You can very fast and immediately grasp the problems of your verse. So I would agree to your suggestion that music and song is coming back into poetry.
Now, there are some questions against these theories in India, especially. They say that when you concentrate on the music, then you have to fix your verse, or you have to bring your verse in a structure. And in that case, you may lose the power of words sometimes. Not unless you are a very, very expert, because we can't say that everyone. We have a wonderful poetry and music in our by ancient scholars. Now these days, everyone writes poetry. That is not bad. That is good also, because everyone should write. That is how we feel that. But in that case, if there is no if there is a musical structure, we call the chandas, meters. Suppose you
Yes.
have to bring the poetry be within the meter, then structure is already there, and you have to add your ideas in that. In that case, unless you are expert, you cannot bring all your ideas in given space. That is how goes against this metric poetry. And this is a question. What do you say about it?
Well, that's about right. If you are following strict meters, like, for example, the meter of the iambic pentameter that is used in the classical sonnet, and you are restricted not only to the meter of this iambic pentameter, but also to certain other things. You have to put your thoughts into 4 stanzas, 2 quartines, and 2 tercets, and you have to use an end rhyme scheme, end rhyme pattern, and 14 lines are available for you. So this forces you as a poet to condense your thoughts and your language in order to adapt it to this classical scheme, to this sonnet scheme. The same holds true, of course, for the terza rima structure. Those, by the way, are the 2 classical forms we inherited in Europe from the Renaissance. The sonnet is the oldest classical form, dating back to the 12th century, whereas the terza rima, this kind of structure we owe to Dante. We mentioned him before. Dante Alighieri. He wrote his Divine Comedy exclusively using these terza rima patterns. But the modernist in the last century, the European modernists, particularly the Anglo-Saxon modernists like Thomas Stearns Eliot, they broke with this tradition because they thought it not adequate to the chaos of modern times and to all the suffering and the problems arising after World War I and then, of course, after World War II. But independently of Eliot and the modernist, even poets like Goethe, you may know him. We have these Goethe institutes all over the world. Goethe is cherished like Shakespeare in England. We have our Goethe. And Goethe, for example, he didn't like sonnets because he felt that his mind was restricted too much by the meter and by the prerequisites of a sonnet. So he preferred other patterns. But let me just refer very briefly also to Bertolt Brecht. Brecht is one of the outstanding poets of the last century. He is better known for his dramas and his plays, but he also was a very fine poet. And he used in his later poetry the so-called free verse. Free verse, that means a verse that was not restricted to the classical patterns like sonnets or lead forms or tercets, but it consisted of freely composed lines. Nevertheless, these lines were ruled by a certain meter. So free verse does not mean that you just write a very chaotic language, but still you use a certain meter, but this meter can change from line to line. And so you are more free to express your thoughts than using a classical and more restrictive pattern.
It's a very, you have expressed very well, and I got my reply. Why don't you read one or two poem in between, so then we can start questioning, answering afterward. Please read one or two poems. Do you want to read it?
I'm happy to read to you my first poem, which lent the name to the whole cycle. It's called The Universal Theory of Love. But don't be surprised that once in a while I use end rhymes. You know, there has been a time, especially in the modernist era, when end rhymes were looked upon as something very suspicious, and poets didn't like end rhyming very much. But thanks God, those days are over, and we may use end rhymes whenever we feel they need to be used. So you will find some end rhymes in this poem. A universal theory of love. Like Lowell did so well incorporating into poetry the flesh of the world and her bones, I also tried and failed. But then, in the end, I did incorporate the special flesh of women, of peculiar ladies, and their many ways of making love to me like deities. Deities hidden in the secret cracks of what is called the universe, this unkind universe that mocks the normal mortal mind by strangest things like superstring and garter theories, by spooky holes and very dark, dark energies. Truth is, what happened in my latest dream, the universe is actually wearing pink and seamless panties, sheer and shiny, which are kind to her gigantic labia underneath. Of course, you'll find this knowledge neither in textbooks nor on the internet's multiple sites. It is available only to precarious species, such as poets, who believe in the land of epiphanies beyond the common theories. There, King Testosterone is ruling side by side and arm in arm with fair Queen Pheromonia. And only those who reach the realm and don't abide to die from string flu or from very dark pneumonia may be destined to come to know the universe's golden fleece of glory and lust, and linger longer than we know of simple mortals for whom the clock's times always flow. In poems, love and life are generated just from nothingness, like outside, otherwise, the universe's daily mess.
It's very nice poem. Thank you very much. I just, with this poem, when you're talking about universal love, and you know that today's topic, I said love as this as a theme of poetry. I have given topic to today's talk also, though we didn't come to our love poetry. There was also a dilemma in a contemporary poetry, that should we write love poetry or not, or should we write, especially the people from the third world country, they feel that should we write the political, we call political poetry, or the poetry which is related to hunger, pain, sorrows and all. Because being as a student of Sanskrit, I know that when we talk about the aesthetics of literature or aesthetics of poetry, the Shringar rasa means the rasa uh, with erotics, which is deal with erotics, is the very important, most important rasa. Not only in the poetry, but in a theater, in a sculptures, because in Indian temples you find the sculptures which have all uh, all kind of erotic statues also, because that is not that is very natural, very
Yes.
natural, and mm, uh, and our great poet, uh, whom we were unable to present, like Goethe and other, the Kalidas, if you heard his name, he was great poet of his time, and even recent. The Kalidas maximum poetry was written the erotic. Even we say that a Sanskrit, the erotics was very strong. Very. The thing is that according to aesthetics, uh, what we call the Shringara rasa or erotics, erotics does not deal only with the love making. It deals with the sorrow, pain, and distance, and many other feelings, emotions, which we forgot. Uh, I remember a Serbian poet's poetry, and he has written a war poetry which I had translated, and in that, in within the war, the love poem is going, means in within on the road, when because Serbian, you know that Serbia war was quite difficult. It
Right.
was inside the city, so in the city, in the empty roads, in that broken houses, he was searching the shadows of his beloved, and that itself make it very romantic as well as very painful, because war was there, but through uh, the love. So that is now another thing is that when I was talking to a Turkish poet, young Turkish poet, he told me that I know that my country has many problem and we are against, we are dealing with many problem, that he said. And he said that, but if I don't write love poetry, what will my next generation find in this area, this era? Because when they go back, they will feel that, oh, that time, this was the period when there was no love poetry, and that won't be good. So that is how I feel the importance is love is more in this difficult time, especially in pandemic, when we are not allowed to touch, we are not allowed to hug our friends, we are not allowed to talk as freely, as we are suspicious to every unknown person that he may sneeze on us, or we may get this virus, and we are very alone, very lonely. without any touch, because touch is the most strongest power, and we are without touch. And
That's right.
that time, I feel that the duty of love poetry increases.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you
Yeah,
please tell me, tell
I,
me
I,
something.
I fully agree. The question you more or less touched on was should one focus on writing political poems when times are bad, or should one focus more on writing love poems? I think the answer is a mixed one. Actually, every good poem is a love poem. It's kind of a love poem because if you don't love mankind or other men or women, it's practically impossible to write good poetry. This holds not only for lyrical poets, but also for all sorts of poets. If you don't love uh, humans, you are not able to produce acceptable or interesting work. So, this said, I would say you are completely right. In the times of a pandemic like this that we are facing right now, where we have to observe distancing, which is although it's called social distancing, it's it's a misnomer. One would say one would prefer to call it geographic or geometric distancing. And nevertheless, we have to obey these recommendations of geometric distancing, but must not forget to overcome the loneliness of each of us, of each active person. A poet needs an audience, and other people need to be able to listen to comforting texts, to comforting poems. And that's why we should fill this vacuum imposed by us, by the virus on us, with more love poems than we otherwise would be obliged to do. So, in one brief sentence, yes, you are right. We need love poems, and the more the worse the times around us, the more love poems we need. That's an inverse relation in my eyes.
So shall we read? I want to read one of your poem in Hindi, and first you can you read in Still Life? Do we read
Or
that poem? Yeah, I will
yeah,
read in Hindi. Yeah.
wonderful. Go ahead.
I hope it is okay. Translation is okay. Please read in English first.
In English, okay. Let me see
English or
where it is.
German, whatever.
No, I read it to you in English. So here it is. Still life. There we lay, two paired orange halves, still sticky and full of juice, the fingers resting deep in the other's flesh, softly forgetting for a blink of an eyelash, not feeling the knife, which was ready for us to finish the peeling, flash in the sunlight.
I like this poem very much because very suggestive poem is this. वहां हमने संतरे के दो जोड़ी अर्धभाग देखे रखे जो अभी भी चिपचिपे थे लेकिन रस से भरपूर उंगलियां धीरे धीरे मांस की मुलायमियत में धसने लगी हम पलक झपकना भूलने लगे हमारे लिए एक चाकू है छीलन पूरा करने के लिए दमकने के लिए सूरज की रोशनी में
Thank you very much. I didn't understand a word, but the sound was very interesting because I noticed several rhyme structures in it. So that's interesting. If you convert English poems into Hindi, they start to rhyme all at once.
Yeah. Do we read another poem? Escaping from the Opera. You have that?
Yes. Should I give some explanation beforehand?
Yeah, please.
Because escaping from the opera makes reference to not only going into the opera, but to a specific opera that was given at the place where the poem is set, namely Don Giovanni by Mozart. And as you all know, Don Giovanni was this guy who loved all these women all over Europe. But he actually he didn't love them, but he only made love to them without loving them. And at the end of his career, a stony ghost appears and tries to make him regret all the broken hearts he kind of left before he was going to die. And but Don Giovanni refused to regret, and thus the stony ghost kind of sent him to hell. And now there is a phrase sung by another singer who survived the death of Don Giovanni. And this song starts with the line, Questo è il fin di chi fa mal. This is the end of the wrongdoer. And this line is incorporated in the poem, Escaping the Opera. So should I read it first in English and then you?
Yeah, please.
All right. Escaping the Opera. Remember standing with me in the dark, escaping? Or did we drown in the wild currents of the music of that show? You know, all these big shots, bigoted looks, undressing you, skeletonizing me. Nudes they always like. For good or worse, they tend to take each opera for real. They always take for real what they want. We left before the story's stony ghost appeared, and some olden onlooker would collapse in need of mouse-to-mouse resuscitation. Questo è il fin di chi fa mal. This was the end of the wrongdoer, and we were off duty, only prone to each other's loving mouth, and yet we couldn't tell the undercurrents of a single cell involved in our heat exchanging fervor.
Thank you. Here, what I understand, that here also you know that fear and love you are bringing together. Is it true?
Right.
Yeah.
And even the reason for this mutual love is unknown to the lovers. That's expressed in the last lines.
And I remember when I was in Munich, I was there for 3 months for a residency. So 2 months, 2 months I was in Vedra. It was near the Alps. So last month I was in the city, and there we have to go in a hall. There was opera or some kind of presentation was there, but we couldn't enter inside. It was free, but it was full, even night 10 o'clock. And I was told that these were the ghost stories were told there. So as an Indian, it is very new for me because we are not habitual of telling the stories of ghost so much. But we could not enter inside. We could not enter because it was full.
I
Uh,
see.
so I remember that the ghost stories kind of thing, but I don't know the stories because you know that in Germany everything is in German. But we wanted to experience. That is why I've gone.
Hmm.
So दिस इज एस्केपिंग फ्रॉम द ओपेरा. ओपेरा से भागते हुए चले बाहर निकलते हुए. चलो हम याद रखते हैं अंधेरे में साथ साथ खड़े होना या फिर वहां से भाग जाना. क्या हम संगीत लहरियों में डूबे थे या फिर उस नाटक में. तुम्हें मालूम ही होगा कि ये छोटे छोटे दृश्य तुम्हें अनावृत करते हैं और मुझे कंकाल बना देते हैं. उन्हें हमेशा ही नग्नता ही पसंद है, चाहे अच्छी हो या बुरी. वे हर एक ओपेरा में सच्चाई खोजते हैं. हम भूत प्रेतों के आने से पहले ही निकल पड़े जब कुछ दर्शक बेहोश होकर गिर जाते और क्वेंटो एल दिल एल्फिन दी सी फामल मुंह से मुंह में ऑक्सीजन को की चाहना में हम बाहर निकल चुके थे आपस में चुंबन करते हुए. हम अपनी ध्वनियों की सराहनाओं को बता नहीं सकते जो हमारी अदला बदली दिलों की अदला बदली की एक कोशिका है. It's a very concrete and very complex poetry. The
Thank you
fear.
very much for translating it. Sounds very, very beautiful.
I have to work more because this is the first draft I have done. I have to work more on this poem. One more poem is there with the translation. We can read that poem also, which is the home I suddenly found there.
Found there?
Found there.
Yes.
Home I suddenly found there.
Right. So I'm going to read it.
Yeah, please.
All right. Home I suddenly found there. Once I lingered longer at the window. Outside the summer undecided, floating in twilight. I lifted my eyes up over the hillside. There they ignited the gloomy clouds. A ravishing light overcame every day's dry gray. The deeper I looked, the better I saw your graceful image ascending sky high.
Thank you. So it's nature and love together, and it is most beautiful when you are watching the nature with your beloved. Actually, what I feel that my one poem, I think if I send you about the sea is
Yes.
the almost the watching the sea in a different, because you're standing with someone whom you love and then you're expecting that love from your nature. So this is a very beautiful expression. मुझे अचानक वहां ठिकाना मिल गया. एक बार मैं खिड़की पर कुछ ज्यादा ही टिका रहा गर्मियों के दिनों में. असमंजस में गोधूली में डूबते हुए मैंने अपनी निगाह उदास बादलों की तरफ घुमाई. वहां वे उन बादलों को प्रज्वलित कर रहे थे. मैंने देखा कि एक चमकदार रोशनी बुझने लगी. जितनी गहराई से मैं देखता रहा वो उतनी ही बेहतर दिखने लगी, आकाश में चढ़ती हुई तुम्हारी तस्वीर की तरह. I think I mixed something and I made mistake and I left something in between. But I bought your poem here because while reading, while reading, I find that I missed some lines. Sorry for that. So I want to tell you that love poetry is taken as in a statics. People don't go back to statics. We have a very wonderful statics by our Natya Shastra, our Bharat Muni, and before that also we have talked about the poetics. And the love was very main idea of not only poetry, even spirituality.
Yeah.
In India, the Shiva and Uma, what we say that uh, the Ardhanarishwar, the half man and half woman, are the symbol
Yes.
of spirituality, theater, poetry, and all art form. Because every art form have these two things.
I see.
And without their connection, without they mix to each other, you cannot bring anything. Moreover, we have many other forms, like in a love itself, you have sorrow, you have pain, you have many emotions come in the love itself. Love is not only the physical love, but physical love is very strong here in Indian ancient um, uh, ancient aesthetics, but somehow in modern days we are forgetting it. We are becoming
That's right.
very straight. Our expression, even like Bollywood songs, also when we see the old songs, they have love in a beautiful, with all the nature and everything comes in between. But now everything is so harsh, so there is nothing, no imagination in between. So and recently you bought a book, a journal, very important journal. I saw when I got it, you have worked hard in a bilingual, but not bilingual, many-lingual, because every poet was writing in his own. Yes, 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 it is a wonderful book. And
Thank you.
see, how many languages are there in this book? Please talk about it.
Mm,
And how did you get this idea?
well, first of all, I think Hindi is represented by Rati Saxena, the aroma of spices. Then we have German, English, and we have Madumba, which is an African language, and Hebrew. We have a Hebrew poem in this issue, and Spanish from a poet from Peru. And we also have a Dutch poem from a poet from the Netherlands. So let me count: Dutch, Hebrew, English, German, Hindi, Madumba, six different languages. Yeah.
And the
And
importance.
the idea was, I founded this journal 2 years ago, and the first issue only appeared in March this year. And the idea behind this that in the times of globalization, in order to get along with each other, we need to get to know each other better. And one of the windows into each other's gardens, so to speak, is poetry. If you open up a window into the different gardens, into the diversity of gardens by printing poems in a diversity of languages, the chance gets higher to address a global audience. And this was the rationale, so to speak, behind the ARIEL project.
So And you have worked very hard, because I remember that it took so much time for me to give you write a script, because whenever I send you the Hindi script, it's changed. It happened many times to me, because in Serbian also they have done beautiful translation, but the script changed. But you were not. You were keep sending me emails to make it correct. So
Yes,
it
yes.
was so it was good. That when I'm happy. This was I read poetry. Mostly you have collected the love poetry, and that is why I feel that this book is very, very important
Thank
in
you.
this time, pandemic
Mhm.
time. So, do you want to say something more about which I have forgotten to ask you, or I do not know? I made some. Do you want to speak something more about some more topics, or about the topic itself?
Well, I'm quite content with this topic, and I would be happy to uh, still focus on love poetry. I think modern love poetry has a long tradition in the Western countries as well as in your country, but in the during the modern ages, modernists kind of neglected this topic. And when I did a little research on the um, contemporary scene in Germany, dealing with love poems, the contemporary poets, and I went through the anthologies. I was stunned by the fact that very little poems, very little poets, and very few poems were really dealing with the erotic side of love. At the most, you read about a man's or a woman's feeling, but you hardly encounter erotic details of how a couple, for example, makes love to each other. So that's why I went to the American anthologies and browsed through them, and quite astonishingly, I found very many good poems by very famous poets dealing with specific erotic details in their love poems. For example, Anne Sexton, the famous poet from Boston, who in 1976 committed suicide because of her bipolar disease. She published wonderful love poems collected in a poetry book with the same title, Love Poems, where you can find all sorts of stark images and metaphors relating to sexual love. And what was even more astonishing for me, when I switched to Hebrew poetry, I found an outstanding female poet there, namely Yona Wallach, who lived from 1944 to 1985. And today she's considered one of the first feminist Israeli poets, although she never might have thought of herself as such. But in continuing the pioneering work of Yehuda Amichai and Dalia Revikovich, who were the first to revolutionize Hebrew poetry regarding the implementation of unveiled imagery regarding erotic details, Yona Wallach was able not only to pursue the pioneering work of Amichai and Revikovich, but to exceed them regarding the clearness of her erotic language. Maybe I just read to you some passages of her very impressive work. because she kind of committed a transgression regarding the use of sacred things in the context of sexual or erotic love. I give you a passage of this poem called Tefillin. Tefillin means in Hebrew phylacteries. These are leather strips wound around the arm and the forehead of males during prayer. And these are very sacred things. And Yona Wallach just puts them into the context of sexual love and of bondage even. So now, let me give you this brief passage. Tefillin. You put on the tefillin for me too. Bind them on my hands, lay them on me, move them with delight on my body, rub them hard against me, stimulate me everywhere, make me swoon with sensation, move them over my clitoris, tie my waist with them, so I'll come quickly, play them in me. So that's a very daring language, isn't it?
Yes, true. Very daring. But I saw such kind of daring language only in Sanskrit. After that, we hardly find in Indian literature. And being a Sanskrit student, sometimes we got irritated also at that time because we were young, 18 years, 19 years old, and we were listening, keep on listening so much erotics in between the Shiva and Parvati and all this, so much. And it make sometimes irritated at that time because we were young. And then you know that the young people are more prone to darkness. They are more prone to death. We have imagination that young people go only for love. This is not true. Because they wanted to see the darkness of the society, of the world. They wanted to see the death and other many things. So we got irritated at that time. But after many years in this age, I find that no, we have lost so much a great tradition, and which was actually our ancestors were honest. They could openly say it. Our saint poets also openly say that they could, yes, I have prepared a bed for my beloved, let my beloved, like Meera, she is a saint poet and she is calling God as a beloved to her bed. So this kind of so there only after some time only, when you get mature, then you find that why this connection was, why this the Ardhanarishwar, or the half man and half woman, and why these two things are together, because these are the complete matter, and this is only the universe, this is only the nature. So thank you very much. If you have any last word to say, you are free to say.
Well, my last word would be to have this kind of poetry in Western countries is getting more and more difficult, because we have this woke movement and this movement of so-called political correctness. And I only can hope that the poison of this political correctness and of the over-genderization, so to speak, will never enter the field of poetry, of love poetry. That's my last word.
Thank you very much. We are very happy to find you here and listen to you, because we were actually talking about, because because of this my submission. It's a very long poem, and it was the only poem, the very erotic poem, the only poem I have written. And you have published the whole poem. You are the first person who has published in a print the whole poem, is because it is quite big.
I'm glad we did it.
Thank you. I'm really, really grateful to you. You join us, and hope we will meet sometime next time again, with some other topics or some other themes. And my best wishes for your work, because you are in a different languages. You are doing so much work. So I thank you again to join me in this talk. Thanks a lot, Dr. Amadé.
Thank you, Raji, for having me. I'm very grateful. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.